Welcome back to the South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans for Ohio State fans. From the West Coast, I'm your host, Zach Moore. Today is Thursday, July 11th, 2024, and I'm very happy to be joined once again by fellow South Stands contributor Paige Van Horn from Denver. PVH, how's it going, my friend?
It's going well, dude. It's good to be back from the Greek homeland in one piece, a little scarred, but good trip. Happy to be back here and excited to hop on a very preseason pod with you boys, but season's right around the corner. So
it's right around the corner. Big Ten Media Days is in 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks from now. Big Ten Media Days. And to me, that always feels like the start of the season when that kicks off. We are also joined by fellow contributor Chad Plummer from Cleveland. CP, what's the word from the 216?
Hey, guys.
What's up? I believe it's like I think it's like, I don't know, 40 some days to college football kickoff. Like, this is such a perfect time to be doing this. There's so much shit going on. I'm like so excited. It's good to be on here with you boys. Like,
yeah, man.
Good to hear your voices.
Likewise, my friend.
Buckeye
good to hear your
football,
voice.
Babe. Let's go.
All right, let's do it. So we are here to have a look at the 5 games that will define Ohio State's 2024 regular season. Now, I did a complete preview of the 2024 schedule back on June 8th, and if you're interested in learning about the other 7 opponents on Ohio State's schedule, I invite you to check that pod out. But today, we're going to keep our focus on the 5 most intriguing matchups on the schedule that are actually going to tell us something about the 2024 Buckeyes. Now, those opponents are Iowa, Oregon, Nebraska, Penn State, and of course, that team up north. Now, to help us get a handle on these opponents, I'm going to be referencing some rankings from 3 different college football preview magazines that I picked up this offseason throughout this discussion, Lindy's, Athlon, and Phil Steele. So, gentlemen, with no further ado, let's jump into it. Now, if you're a casual fan and you don't like sitting through Ohio State blowouts, then I invite you to hit the snooze bar until early October, because the 2024 season for Ohio State doesn't really start until October 5th when the Iowa Hawkeyes come to Columbus. And Ohio State has not played the Hawkeyes for a couple of years. 2022 is the last time these two teams met. Ohio State won that game in a laugher, 54-10. The Buckeyes lead the all-time series between these two schools 48-15 with 3 ties. Now, the number of returning starters, according to the season preview magazine, is going to vary a little one from the next. I'm going to use Phil Steele's as our guide for returning starters. Now, according to Steele, the Hawkeyes returned 18 starters from a squad that went 10-4 and won the Big Ten West Division last season. PBH, did you remember that Iowa actually won the Big Ten West?
That's absurd. Well, again, so you can do your obligatory say goodbye to the East-West, and we don't have to endure that pain any longer. Hallelujah.
Yeah, I mean, I had forgotten, I think temporarily, that they actually won the division. Nowhere to go but up for the Iowa offense, which finished dead last, 133rd nationally in total offense a year ago. And I think there's good reason to expect the Hawkeyes are going to be much improved on that side of the ball, because they have a new offensive coordinator, Tim Lester, who replaces Daddy's boy, Brian Ferentz. I mentioned this on the season preview pod I did last month. Did you guys realize that the Iowa athletic director had to fire Brian Ferentz because his dad didn't have the stones to do it? This is a sad state of
Kirk. Come on, Kirk.
Now, the Iowa offense is going to be getting 2 key players back from injury.
Michigan.
They suffered season-ending injuries a year ago. Quarterback Cade McNamara and tight end Luke Lachey. Lachey is the son of former Ohio State offensive lineman Jim Lachey. By the way, he also went to my high school. I didn't realize that. Now, Iowa's 2 leading rushers return. They're going to get 2 good running backs back, LaShawn Williams and Caleb Johnson. They combined for almost 1,300 yards rushing and 4.5 yards per carry last season. Now, Phil Steele wrote in his magazine that he thinks the Iowa offensive line is going to be the best that they've had in years. The big question for Iowa, I think, is going to be on the outside. It's been eons, I think, since they've had any real threats at receiver. Caleb Brown, the Ohio State transfer, is probably going to be the best they've got on the outside at receiver. Brown only caught 22 passes for 215 yards and a touchdown last season. So that's the story for Iowa on offense. On defense, of course, it's a much different tale. Iowa's going to be excellent on defense. They were last year. They finished 7th nationally in total defense, number 1 in defensive yards per play, 5th in pass defense, and 4th nationally in scoring defense. They're going to be really good at linebacker. They return their 4 leading tacklers, including middle linebacker Jay Higgins, who led the country in tackles last season. Also, talented safety Xavier Wampa, who's a player Ohio State recruited very heavily before he picked Iowa, returns. Phil Steele is really bullish on the Iowa defense. According to Steele, the Hawkeyes have the number 1 linebacker room in America. They have the number 5 secondary and the number 13 defensive line. These are national rankings. And they probably have the best defensive coordinator in the country in Phil Parker. Iowa also was a top 10 special teams, according to Phil Steele, both last year and this year. Now, Athlon has the Hawkeyes ranked 28th in their preseason rankings. Lindy's has them ranked 27th in their preseason rankings. Now, Phil Steele, though, he likes the Hawkeyes a little better than those two publications. He's got the Hawkeyes number 18 in his power poll. And he has Iowa number 7 among what he calls his surprise teams for 2024. And he defines surprise teams as non-preseason AP top 10 teams that he thinks actually has a decent shot at making the playoffs. I said on the last pod that I did on the schedule that I thought this was going to be a rock fight. I think this is going to be Ohio State's first real test of the season. The early line on this game, according to DraftKings, is Ohio State minus 24, so they don't think it's going to be particularly close. PVH, I'm going to kick this over to you. Give me a few thoughts on this game and your concernometer for this matchup.
Well, it's crazy that they actually have a line for this game, because I was just thinking we should also, in addition to our concernometers, we should try and predict the line.
Yeah.
So it's absurd.
Oh, they already have them out, bro.
DraftKings does, yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know what manifesto rule this falls into, but no Big Ten team's ever allowed to finish dead last in any statistical category.
I agree.
Whatsoever. Again, how is that even effing possible, right? It's it's somewhere around rule 14 to 19, I would think. I'm the only thing I could think that's relevant of this game is it's going to be a look ahead game, because the next week is Oregon.
That's right.
You got to show me something just because you get a new offensive coordinator,
Right.
Hopefully there's some marginal improvement from 132nd to, maybe
nowhere to go
85th.
but up.
Yeah, there's no effing way on God's green earth that's going to be good enough to beat this team. Are we doing? Can I give you my concernometer?
Yeah, give us a concernometer score. Yeah, let's do
0. It's a solid 0.
A solid 0. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Even though they're going to bring a pretty salty defense into this game, you're not concerned.
It's not enough, dude.
Yeah, that's correct.
It's just not. It's at home. It's not enough. The only I would maybe take it up to 0.75 just on the look ahead factor, but actually I'm just going to round it back down to 0. It's not happening. There's just no way. Yeah,
this is going to be a very veteran, experienced Ohio State team, and one would think that the look ahead factor wouldn't be as much of a factor because of that veteran experience. CP, I want to kick this over to you. Give us a few thoughts on this game and give us your concernometer score.
All right. Well, my thoughts on this is this is the one game that I really didn't do a lot of recon on. I know they're getting a new offensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's the cameras panned across the stands over the last season of people actually falling asleep with Kirk's son calling plays on the offense. They do have one of the best punters coming back.
No, he's off to the NFL. Actually, he got drafted.
No, but there's
they got another one.
Is coming.
Oh, okay.
Yes, he's just I don't know.
Nothing screams Iowa football like punters and tight ends.
We're gonna get $4 million NIL to this kid that's punter from Florida. Obviously their offensive line is supposed to be legit. Defense is supposed to be ridiculous. But you've got a first year offensive coordinator coming in. And this Ohio State team is there is no look ahead. You know what I mean? I
would certainly hope
this
not.
Team is all business. No, they're all business. They're going to come in, take them down, and then it might be a little close for the first 6 or 7 minutes. But the defense, they lost a few players. They lose a linebacker and a defensive end. They're not going to be able to contain that offense. And our defense, for the first time in so many years, and we've talked about this so many times, and I'll expand on this, is I'm it's going to be glorious.
Okay. Yeah.
So my concern meter is I'm going to go just the opposite of what I used to, I always do, because I'm always the positive one out of the three of us, but I'm going to throw a three on that concern.
A three. Okay. Okay.
Well, I mean, three minus three, really, at the end of the day, but I'm going to throw a three on it.
Okay. I got this one at a 6, which I know seems a little high. That's my concern meter score. But if the preseason prognostications are right here, guys, I was going to bring a defense into this game that'll be very similar to the 2022 defense. And I don't know if you guys remember this. That 2022 Iowa defense actually gave the Buckeye offense in that game some trouble. Iowa held the Buckeye rushing attack that day to 2.2 yards per carry. They held Ohio State to 3 of 13 on third down and only 360 yards of total offense in that game. That game became a blowout because of the complete ineptitude of the Iowa offense. I mean, Iowa had 6 turnovers in that game. Now, C.J. Stroud managed to throw 4 touchdown passes in that game, but every single one of those passes was contested. I mean, he had to drop balls in buckets all afternoon to keep the chains moving. I think Iowa might be able to replicate what they did a little bit on defense. And I think if they can, and they can limit the Buckeye rushing attack as they did back in 2022 and force Will Allen to make throws into tight windows, I don't know. This could be a game. I certainly think this is going to be a game at least for a couple quarters. I think this is going to be a close game at the half. But like you guys,
can I make a comment?
Ohio State just has too much, right? Too many weapons, too deep. I think they pull away in the second half. Sorry, go ahead, CP.
Chip Kelly, like that offense is going to be there's going to be so many formations in that backfield. Like there's just so much shit going on. Like that Iowa defense is going to be like all fucking twisted. That's not a concern.
I mean, clearly I'm the outlier of the group. And even if you compare the line, the DraftKings line, right? Ohio State's minus 24.5. They don't seem particularly concerned about this game, but you know me, I'm the worrier of the group. I'm just, I'm playing my role here, guys. Okay. So, why don't we move on to the next? This is the game we want to talk about anyway. The following week, October 12th, the Buckeyes travel to Eugene. This will be for the first visit to Eugene since 1967 to square off with the Oregon Ducks in what will almost certainly be a top 3 matchup and one of the most anticipated games of the entire college football season. Ohio State is 9-1 all time against Oregon, but that lone loss, I think the two of you remember it, came the last time these schools played back in 2021 in the Horseshoe because you guys were there.
Chad, well, just to be clear, Chad wasn't there in the second half because he left.
Chad could not bear to watch. He left.
I have not gone back to the shoe, Zeke, because of that game. We go up at halftime, and I'm like, Paige, like I want to get out of here. I don't feel like this is a good. He's like, all right, well let's go back, sit down real quick. I'm like, let's go watch this game over there at the Blackwell. And he's like, no, just come in and just the beginning of the half. And then the first play, he breaks that
CJ Verdell
touchdown.
Yeah. Yeah, there was just something in the air that day. You could just kind of tell something wasn't quite right. And I think that whole season, right? You know what I remember about that game? You guys probably would not have been aware of this. Maybe you saw it on Twitter afterwards. But when the marching band took the field, the guy that leads the marching band, with the baton and the big, white hat, he totally biffed it, totally wiped out coming out of the tunnel. He comes out high stepping. It was just a bad omen. It turned out to be a
juju.
Now, according to Phil Steele, Oregon returned 17 starters from a team that went 12-2, finished number 2 in the Pac-12, and number 7 in the final AP poll. Now, I should note that Steele is including transfers who started for other programs last season who are projected starters this season. Otherwise, I think Oregon would probably have about a returning starter total of 10. Now, if there is a head coach who could rightly claim to have had a better offseason than Ryan Day, it would probably be Dan Lanning. Oregon finished he finished with the country's number 3 rated recruiting class according to 24/7 Sports. They're number 2 in the 24/7 Sports transfer rankings. And Lanning did really well for himself in the portal, right? He scored 2 uber-talented quarterbacks out of the portal, Dylan Gabriel of Oklahoma, Dante Moore of UCLA. We think Gabriel's probably going to be the starter, but Dante Moore, there's going to be a competition. He also grabbed a former 5-star receiver in Evan Stewart out of Texas A&M. And on defense, he landed a pair of really good defensive tackles in Jamari Caldwell of Houston and Derek Harmon of Michigan State. He also scored a pair of really good starting caliber cornerbacks in Washington's Jabbar Muhammad and UTSA's Cam Alexander. And on offense, look, the Ducks are going to be loaded, fellas. They're bringing back an excellent tailback in Jordan James. Yeah, Jordan James, he averaged 7.1 yards per carry last season as a reserve. He was their second stringer. They also returned one of the best receivers in the country in Tez Johnson, who caught 86 balls for almost 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns. They also have a really good tight end, Terrence Ferguson, who'll be back for the Ducks. He was first-team All-Pac-12 last year. Guys, I mean, Dylan Gabriel, he's going to be their projected starter. He completed 69% of his passes at Oklahoma last season. He threw for 30 touchdowns. I mean, I said on the last pod when I looked at the schedule, this is going to be hands down the most potent offense the Ohio State defense is going to face during the regular season, perhaps all year. According to Phil Steele, Oregon has the number 3 quarterback room in America. Steele thinks they have the number 1 receiver group, even better than Ohio State. He also likes their offensive line. He rates their offensive line the number 3 offensive line in the country. They were a Joe Moore Award finalist last year. They returned 3 of 5 starters on the offensive line. Oregon does. Now on defense, this is where Oregon might have a few questions, especially up front. According to Phil Steele, Oregon has the number 23 defensive line in America, the number 7 linebacker group, and he ranks their secondary number 11. So not bad, but I think the defense is going to be good, but Ohio State's clearly going to be better, and I think Ohio State is going to see much better defenses elsewhere on the schedule. Steele and Athlon have Oregon number 3 in their preseason rankings. Lindy's has the Ducks at number 4. The very, very early line on this game, according to FanDuel, fellas, is Oregon minus 1.5. Wow. And DraftKings has this as a pick'em. So I think this game could go either way. And I said this before we jumped on. It feels like October 12th isn't going to be the only time these two teams play, right, boys? PVH, I'm going to kick this over to you. Give me a few thoughts on this game and a concernometer score.
So I'm just did a little look-see at Oregon's schedule. I'm calling it right now. They're going to have 1 loss going into that game.
Ooh. Why do you think that?
Ooh, to whom?
Dude, it's an interesting. They start with Idaho, in Eugene. Boise State, if that were in wherever they play, Boise. That might give me concern. Then they play Oregon State, which is weird, right?
Oh,
That's always a big rivalry game, right? The New World Order, like who'd have thought? Then they go to Pasadena and got to play UCLA.
Interesting.
And then they have Michigan State. I'm saying they're going to dump either the Oregon State game or the UCLA game.
Wow. Well, that Oregon State, that's a rivalry game, and there's some bad blood there between the. Yeah, it's in Corvallis, and there's some bad blood between those. I mean, worse than it's been.
It's always close.
Yeah,
it's always pretty close.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So what's your concernometer for this game?
Oh, it's a solid 9. I mean, that's wow. It's going to be, well, actually, no, I'm going to take it down to a 7 because now that I looked at the schedule, but, getting ready for the pod, I wrote down a 9. And, maybe a loss for them sort of helps and takes some of the pressure off. There's also the revenge factor, right?
I don't like that.
There's going to be a little Buckeye revenge on this. So
yeah,
I'm going to bring it down to a 6.5 based on the revenge factor. And I think, dude, they could definitely dump one of those early games.
Okay. All right. Sorry, CP, I missed your text. I don't have I have my phone turned over. Okay.
That's all good.
Let's kick this over to you, CP. Give us some thoughts on this game and a concernometer score.
All right. So like Lanning, I like that dude. Well, he came from Georgia, right? He's
That's right.
He was with Kirby. Good coach. He's solid. It helps to have $32 billion in the fucking bank when you're Phil Knight. You know what I mean? Like let's break it down like real. Like hey, I'm gonna pay you. Because there's a kid that's like we'll get into recruiting whatever from Ohio, but yada yada. So what I feel like is that like they're not like. I would not, going back to Paige's point, I would not want them to be like 2-1 or 3-1, whatever, when we play them. I want them to be undefeated because we'll both be in top 5. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like,
top 3, I think.
For sure. Like, and I want to just like have that. Like, they averaged 44.2 points in like 24. Like that's a lot of points, man. And that's, like that's something that the Ohio State defense has not been like accustomed to, is like somebody out there just like rolling up, 44.2 points a game.
Yeah, we don't see a
But
lot of offenses like this in the Big Ten, for sure.
So who's their?
Exactly.
You might have covered this out. Who's their quarterback? Because Nix is gone.
It's Dylan Gabriel, we think, is the projected starter.
Oh, he's from Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. And they also picked up Dante Moore of UCLA out of the portal as well, who, doesn't have Gabriel's track record and experience, but is very, very talented. And I've read that there will be a competition during the offseason for the starting job, but most folks think it's going to be Gabriel's job. Yeah.
Along with that, Jordan James, dude, they have a pretty like decent like two-headed like run back tandem like with the dude Noah Whittington as well. He's pretty fucking solid.
Okay, good.
Their offensive line's big, but you know what? I'm not really. My concern meter on this game is it's probably like a 2.5.
What?
It's most likely like no, I mean like seriously, like I feel like
Disrespecting the
most likely
Ducks,
gonna be a
man.
night
No
game.
respect from CP on the Ducks.
Mostly like it's gonna be a night game in Oregon. Like, you know what? And it's gonna be like they're probably gonna wear those new like black fly-out whatever uniforms. Did you guys see those things? They came out. They're probably gonna like do that. It's gonna be blackout in Oregon, yada yada. But like, I feel like this team here, like, there's a reason that these dudes came back, man. Yeah, like we're all right. Well, little NIL money, yeah, of course. I mean, but a lot of them wanted to come back just because like unfinished business. Not beating Michigan, not winning a Big Ten championship, and I think they all came back as a group. I feel, and like I just feel that there's a whole different aura and energy about this whole different like this team, man. I'm like, so I don't think it's gonna be like Oregon, and like I think we take care of business.
Okay.
Up there in Eugene.
All right, 2.5 for you. Paige, you have it at a 7, started at a 9, and you're down to a 7?
6.5.
6.5 for you. Okay. This is a 10. This is a 10. This is a top 3 matchup on the road for me. This is a 10. Of course, I'm always going to score higher than you guys on the concernometer. This is without a doubt the best, most complete team Ohio State's going to face during the regular season. It's on the road in a stadium Ohio State hasn't visited since 1967. And there are a bunch of strength-on-strength matchups in this game that should be really interesting. So, for example, Ohio State's defensive line and secondary, which Phil Steele rates as the number 1 units in America, against Oregon's number 1 rated receivers and number 3 rated quarterbacks and offensive line. And I said on our last pod, I think Ohio State could play very well in this game and still lose. You could say the same for Oregon, right? They could play well and still lose because of the opponent. A win would propel Ohio State toward the number 1 overall seed in the college football playoff. Again, you could say the same for Oregon. But, I do feel good about this matchup for Ohio State. Ohio State has the talent, the veteran leadership, and experience to walk out of Autzen Stadium with a win on October 12th. I firmly believe that. And with most other things being equal between these teams, and CPU referenced it earlier, I can see Chip Kelly being the difference in this game. I mean, we know Kelly's no stranger to Autzen Stadium, right? He's going to know how to prepare his offense to play in that setting. I think he's also going to have a few tricks up his sleeve for the Oregon defense, which looks like it's going to be good, but perhaps not elite and perhaps not as good as some of the other defenses Ohio State's going to face. I got a question, though. Has Oregon under Dan Lanning shown us yet that they can beat a team the caliber of the 2024 Buckeyes?
Yeah,
I'm not sure that he has, right? I mean, he's been there for 2 seasons. Now, we remember they lost 49-3 to Georgia in the season opener in 2022. Last season, they lost twice to Washington. Now, they were close games, but Oregon still lost them both, and Oregon had the more talented team in the matchup with Washington. They also lost to Washington in 2022 as well. I mean, what is Oregon's best win under Dan Lanning so far? I went back and looked at the schedule for the last 2 seasons. A 3-point win over number 10 Utah in 2022 is probably their best win. That was a good win. I mean, Utah ended up winning the Pac-12 that season. And after that, it's probably Liberty in the Fiesta Bowl. So, I mean, since Lanning got to Eugene, the closest thing they've seen to what they'll see in Ohio State on October 12th was Georgia in 2022, and they lost that game by 46 points. Now, I'm not saying Oregon can't beat Ohio State. I'm not saying Ohio State's going to win by 40 points. I'm just saying...
Yeah, but where's the big W?
We haven't seen a big W yet under Dan Lanning at Oregon. So, I think he has a lot to prove in this game as well. So, anyway, PJ, I'm going to kick this back to you. Any other thoughts on this game?
Who was the coach when Oregon beat us in the shoe?
Mario Cristobal.
Oh,
yeah, he's in Miami now.
Bomb.
Right? Yeah,
The Hurricanes, dude. He's on the
and
hot
he
seat.
left. Okay, so my other question, and I think I was curious, who's got this game? It looks like ESPN has this game and Fox doesn't have it, so there's no shot this could be a stupid
big noon
kickoff. Correct?
No, it's going to be a night game, dude. I'm telling you, it's going to be one of the biggest games of the year. And ESPN.
Well,
it's not going to be the big noon game, like
right.
next
Well,
one
I
we're
guess it
gonna
all
talk
depends
about.
who has the broadcast rights. So yeah, I think.
Right.
That might be one thing that works against us. No, dude, you're right. I mean, yeah, they gotta do it. I forgot about that Georgia blowout. I mean, dude, it's gonna be a great game, but I don't know, man. I mean, I should say they got to show it to me first, and they did when they came into the shoe and beat us. So I can't really say that, but
Thanks, Paige.
I think Ohio State. Yeah, well, you weren't there, so I'm just gonna remind you. 'Cause you were walking around.
I was sitting right by you,
listlessly, talking to ghosts. And
I literally was like on the bench
Microdosing.
over at the Blackwell, just talking to anybody that walked by. Like,
it was a bad day.
I don't even think for the first time in my life, I didn't even talk that much. I don't think I just sat there and like, Jesus Christ. I don't know.
no, it'll be a hell of a game. I hope it is at night, and it'll probably come down to a few plays here and there. But Ohio State, I think they'll pull it off. But it definitely could go either way. The beauty is that it doesn't really matter as long as both teams play out.
Yeah.
Just a point earlier, there's a decent chance they'll see each other later on in the season.
Okay, let's skip ahead to October 26th. The Buckeyes will be coming off their second off week of the season. They have 2 off weeks this year, which is very well timed, right, after the trip to Eugene, right? They're going to return home to face the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Now, the last time these two schools played in 2021 in Lincoln, it was a game that was actually very competitive. The Buckeyes eked that game out 26-17. Ohio State is 9-1 all-time against Nebraska, and as we know, many of those games have not been very close. They've been the laughers. Now, according to Phil Steele, the Cornhuskers returned 17 starters from actually a very competitive squad last season. The second-year head coach Matt Rule, I thought he had the Huskers playing pretty well through most of last season. They were 5-3 heading into November. Then they lost 4 straight, all by 1 score. They lost 3 of those 4 by a field goal, and then the other game that they lost was by a touchdown in overtime. They finished 5-7 and tied for 4th in the Big Ten West. Turnovers were a huge problem for Nebraska last season. They led the FBS in turnovers with 31. Might have been a very different season, though, in 2023 if they could have just taken better care of the football. They lost a lot of close games, and obviously turnovers are going to be the difference in close games. Nebraska was very good on defense in 2023. They were 11th nationally in total defense, 7th in defensive yards per play, 13th in scoring defense, and they returned 8 starters from that unit, including their top cornerback in Tommy Hill, their best safety in Isaac Gifford, and defensive linemen Nash Hutmacher and Ty Robinson. Those are 2 very good defensive linemen for them. Phil Steele rates the Huskers' defensive line number 5 in the country. He's got a lot of respect for that defensive line. Their linebackers are 19th, according to Steele, and their secondary is 30th. I have a feeling their secondary is going to be a little bit better than that with Hill and Gifford. On offense, now Nebraska should be much improved this season on that side of the ball with the arrival of stud quarterback Dylan Raiola. This is a guy we know. He was at one point an Ohio State commit and then a Georgia commit. Then he finally commits to Nebraska. He was the number 7 overall player in the 2024 class, according to 24/7 Sports. Raiola is expected to be the day 1 starter for the Huskers, and I think he's going to have a pretty good offensive line in front of him that returns 4 starters. They also have a pair of pretty good running backs, Gabe Ervin Jr. and Emmett Johnson. Now, the big question is who will Raiola's targets be in the passing game? They're leaning on a transfer in Jamal Banks from Wake Forest to elevate the play at receiver. Banks led Wake Forest in receiving last season with 59 receptions and 4 touchdowns. Now, Athlon has Nebraska number 33 in their preseason rankings. Lindy's has the Huskers number 38. Phil Steele has Nebraska 36 in his power poll, and he has them number 2 in his list of most improved teams for 2024. He's pretty bullish on the Huskers. The early line on this game, according to DraftKings, is Ohio State minus 25.5. PVH, give me a few thoughts on this game and your Concernometer score.
I think he's a good coach. But,
yeah.
I mean, this is like the tooth fairy of schools. Like, I mean, like how many years are they just going to lose 7 games by 1 point and they're going to be like, oh, next year is going to be our year. And it never is. It never works out. I mean, I'm sorry. The 80s are over. Tommy Osborne isn't walking through that door. This is an irrelevant program. There's no reason to go to
Tommy
Nebraska.
Frazier.
Oh, well, Tommy Frazier. Their schedule is actually a joke coming into this game, right? I mean, they play Colorado, who may or may not be good, but UTEP, Illinois, Purdue, Rutgers, Indiana.
Sets up nicely for them. Yeah,
it does. Yeah,
I mean, they could very well be undefeated by the time.
I was going to say you took the words right out of my mouth. I think they very well could be undefeated, and they're going to come into the shoe and they're going to get boat raced. I'm sorry. So 24. We should also do the futures bet. Like, I want to start betting these things. I want the Buckeyes plus a couple hundred on this because they're just going to get smoked in this game, especially us being undefeated, beating Iowa or beating Oregon, and then we have a bye week.
Yeah.
And you're going to bring a freshman quarterback in. It's just not going to be enough.
Yeah, good point. All right, so your official Concernometer score obviously is going to be very low, but what is it?
0. It's another 0.
Another goose egg. Okay. How about you, CP? Give us a few thoughts on this game and your Concernometer score.
All right, so Matt Rule is obviously a great coach. He's proven, he's like getting it back. He's like he's like a penthouse suite compared to like Scott Frost. I mean, he had some success at UCF, but Matt Rule is like legit, and he's bringing in like the staff and the players that are coming in there. Dylan Raiola, hey, great, but Tavian St. Clair just got his 5th star, so fuck you, Dylan. But yeah, I agree with Paige. They're gonna get boat raced into the shoe, and it'll just be like, it won't be a good game to be at. You'll be at the Blackwell by the midway through the second quarter. My Concernometer is I'm just gonna roll with that with 2.5 as well.
Okay, all right. I'm at a 4.5. This is an opponent Ohio State can't take lightly. I don't think they will. I think Nebraska's going to challenge them a little bit with a salty defensive front. But I also don't think this game is going to be anything like some of the laughers that we've seen previously in this series. I know you guys are predicting a blowout, and you may very well be right. But like you guys, I agree. This is a tough spot. PBH, you said this. Tough spot for a true freshman, right? Going up against that defensive line and what is widely regarded the best defensive line in the country and the best secondary in the country, even for a quarterback as talented as Dylan Raiola. And I think this also looks like a pretty big mismatch between the Ohio State secondary and those Nebraska receivers. I just don't think they have anybody on the outside. I just don't think the Huskers have enough on offense to keep the Buckeyes from running away with this game late. So I do think Ohio State pulls away and wins convincingly. Maybe I'm not calling quite the blowout you guys are calling for. This game would worry me a lot more if it were in Lincoln instead of the shoe. And PVH, you make a good point coming off an off week too, with an extra week to prepare and heal up, from that Oregon game.
Bye weeks in college football are gigantic.
Huge. It's great they have 2 this year. I think that's going to be, if this season goes as long as we think that it's going to, having that extra off week is going to be pretty huge.
Put them in a body bag, Johnny.
I wonder if the Buckeyes don't cover the 25.5.
Most certainly.
You think so? Okay, and CP. All right. Okay. All right.
Well, we should do it. So back to my original thought is they said what the line's 24,
25.5.
Kicks off my prediction is it'll be Ohio State by 34.
Wow.
Actual kickoff.
So what?
Wowzers.
Yeah. I do think this could be Nebraska could come in as kind of a propped up, fake top 10 team, with a perfect record because of their schedule. And maybe then in that case, they would have Ohio State's attention, right? And Ohio State wouldn't sleepwalk through this game.
Do you think they could actually, if they run their schedule, when they come into the shoe, that they could be in the top 10?
Maybe not quite that high, but I mean, it's on the table that they could go undefeated. Have a look at that schedule, CP. It's pretty flimsy until they get to the Ohio State game.
It's like paper in the rain, like wet paper. But it's all good. I would love for them to come in there and just rules all good. Like, hey, I love life, everything's good. We're turning the program around, and they just get smacked in the face.
They give him like a 10-year extension before the game, right? Because he's 6-0.
The Charlie Weiss special.
The Charlie Weiss contract.
Corn chuckers. Need it, corn chuckers.
All right, let's keep moving here, boys. Let's move on to November 2nd. The following week, the Buckeyes return to Happy Valley to face Penn State. And it's the same take on this game every year, isn't it? Copy and paste, right? These games are always tough and very close, but the Buckeyes almost always find a way to win this game. And I think that take applies to this season's matchup as well. Ohio State is 25-13 all-time against Penn State. The Buckeyes have won the last 7 in this series. Penn State's last win in this series was way back in 2016. Now, head coach James Franklin returns 13 starters from a team that went 10-3, finished 3rd in the Big Ten East, and 13th in the final AP poll. Penn State was a smothering defensive team last season, finishing number 2 in total defense and defensive yards per play. They led the country in sacks. They were number 2 nationally in tackles for loss. And I think they should be a very good defensive team again this season under new coordinator Tom Allen. You guys remember him? He's the former Indiana coach who got shit-canned. Edge rushers Dennis Sutton and Abdul Carter will be back. Now, Abdul Carter is actually converting from linebacker to edge rusher this year. He's a very good player. Linebacker Kobe King, their second leading tackler a year ago, is also back. Phil Steele rates the Penn State defensive line number 2 in the country behind Ohio State, so he loves the defensive line. He has the Penn State linebacker room number 6 and their secondary number 9. So there are really no weaknesses on this Penn State defense, according to Phil Steele. Now, on offense, Penn State is hoping to improve on a disappointing 2023 season. They finished 55th nationally in total offense, 75th in offensive yards per play. And that's why James Franklin went out and hired Andy Kotelnicki away from Kansas to be their new offensive coordinator in the hopes, that's going to inject a little bit more life in the Penn State offense. We know Drew Aller, the quarterback, returns from what was a mildly disappointing 2023 season. His numbers weren't bad, though. 25 touchdown passes to only 2 INTs. He only completed 59.9% of his passes, though. And Aller's going to have a new target. You guys know this name. In Ohio State transfer Julian Fleming. He should help elevate that Penn State passing game somewhat, we think. I'm not sure how much, though. I have my doubts about Fleming as a number 1
That's crazy,
receiver.
Dude. That guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Penn State, we'll see. Penn State has, their receivers are ranked 59th in Phil Steele's rankings. So he's lukewarm on the Penn State receivers. He's also pretty lukewarm on Penn State's offensive line. He has their unit 34th in his national rankings. But we think Penn State's going to be able to run the ball with juniors Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. They'll both be back. Phil Steele ranks the Penn State running back room second only to Ohio State. Athlon has Penn State number 8 in their preseason rankings. Lindy's has them 11th in theirs. But Phil Steele, he likes the Lions. He's got Penn State number 5 in his power poll. I don't know about that. To me, that seems a little high. The early line on this game, according to DraftKings, Ohio State -4. DraftKings thinks it's going to be close. PVH, give me a few thoughts on this game and your concernometer score.
So we know it's going to be the whiteout. It always is. For some reason, this game never gets, well, actually 2 years ago, or was it last year when JTT went off on them, gets the big noon kickoff. So if it's the whiteout, that's just a hard place to play.
I don't think it's going to be. I think it's going to be a Fox big noon kick, I believe. I could be wrong.
Well,
about
okay,
that.
so then for once, I'm not going to complain about the 10 a.m. start.
Choice that day, so they're going to take like that game at noon. Like, so that's beneficial for us.
Yeah, no, totally. That's a huge W for us. The other thing is, like, I think with the advent of the 12-team playoff, there's probably no team in the country that is happier about that than Penn State,
for
right?
sure.
Because they don't have to get over the Ohio State hump, right?
The Ohio State-Michigan hump, right?
Yeah, and especially Ohio State, right? I mean, I feel like, and I could be wrong, like I don't know, their head-to-heads, but I feel like, Ohio State has just been their nemesis, and I kind of wonder if that sort of takes some of the pressure off of them in this game.
Could be.
And allows them to play a little bit more freer than they normally have. So this is, to me, by far the most highest concernometer game. I think the toughest game of Ohio State's schedule. Oregon being a very close number 2, so 1 and 1A.
Okay.
But if it is truly a noon kickoff, I think that's a huge advantage for us. If it isn't, then that's a big benefit to them. And I just think maybe they're not going to feel quite as much pressure to get over the Ohio State hump.
Okay.
And that bodes well for Penn State. So I've got this at a solid concernometer at 8.
8. Okay. Well, yeah, and DraftKings would agree with you. But early line on this, Ohio State -4.
I find that hard to believe. Like, I would think, and again, it's hard to predict lines, but I would have had it less than that, honestly.
Oh, wow.
I would have said
Okay.
like 2 or, less than
Like an
that.
Oregon line, perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. How about you, CP? Give us some thoughts on this game and your concernometer score.
Well, I'll tell you what, there's running back tandems. Like, you got Nick Singleton, and then you Allen. That's pretty solid.
Yeah, they're good.
If we were to go back, over the last we'll just say few years. I could go back probably 7 to 9 years, but with his defense, I don't think I'm not worried about that. So up front, that's one thing that I'm concerned is is Drew gonna live up to the hype? I mean, he's was big time Ohio kid coming out of high school. Last year, his numbers were bad, like you said, Z, but he's they're if he doesn't do anything by the third or fourth game of the season, I think they're gonna be they're gonna be booing that kid and that big ass stadium. James Franklin, the dude's got a track record. He took Vanderbilt, to a multiple win season in the SEC with Vanderbilt. That's unheard of. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But
that's why he got the job.
Yeah. So he got the job,
to get it right. Well, of course, but he
can't win this game.
Seem to get over that hump.
He can't.
He just can't. I mean, he's lost the last 7.
No.
I do think Penn State will be in the college playoff.
Yeah, I agree with that
Will
too.
be one of the 12 teams.
Yeah.
But I have to take probably 5 to 7 points off the concern meter in spread thing because it's going to be a noon game. I mean, the whiteout, that's legit shit. You know what I mean?
Right. It'll still be a whiteout, I would assume. It's just won't be at night.
Well, right.
Yeah.
I mean, we do have and the one thing we have going on, we have a veteran team. I mean, so that's it's not like they're going into that place for the first time. But so my concern meter on that's probably a 5.
Okay, a 5.
So before you go, Zach,
Sure.
They got UCLA at USC at Wisconsin, then Ohio State.
Walk.
Wow, all in a row.
All in a row.
We have Iowa, Oregon, and Nebraska.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And by the way,
Battle test.
I'm not going to go on my big noon rant, but I really want to because actually now that I want that to be a night game. I don't understand.
I do too, dude.
Why do we continue to to shoot ourselves in the foot by not having fantastic environments played at prime time? I know the reason it's money, but still, there's going to be more. If I'm Penn State and that is not a whiteout game, I'm just beside myself.
Yeah.
And that's another word.
Whiteout at
on it every year. It drives me effing insane.
I know. We that's another thing we can copy and paste is your big noon rant from one season to the next. But this is a good thing for Ohio State, I think. The night games are a little bit more perilous of an environment, though I think this team is built to handle any environment on the road, personally. I had this as at a 6.5. Drew Aller's got some arm talent. He's got a live arm, but he just doesn't scare me. And nor do the Penn State receivers. All due respect to our friend Julian Fleming. And as I said on the last pod, I think the Penn State defense is going to be a notch below what it was a year ago with Chop Robinson, Adisa Isaac, and Kalen King all moving on to the NFL. I think Phil Steele's overrating this team just a little bit. I think this will be a 4-quarter game for sure. It always is. But I like the Buckeyes by something like 10 to 14 points. And it's going to be very interesting to see where the Buckeyes stand after this game. They'll be 8 games in, having just finished the meat of the schedule: Iowa at Oregon, Nebraska at Penn State. 2 very tough road games against top 10 opponents, 2 excellent defensive teams in Iowa and Nebraska in the Horseshoe. Thankfully there is that off weekend between Oregon and Nebraska. But we're going to learn a lot about this team, during this 5-week stretch between October 5th and November 2nd. And if Ohio State has any fatal flaws, these opponents should bring them out. PVH, before we move on to the last of these 5 teams I want to look at, any more thoughts on Penn State?
No, I think we covered it. I
okay.
mean,
all right. CP, how about you? Any other thoughts?
I'm glad to see. I would like to thank you for bringing up Julian Fleming, because you guys both know that I was a big Julian Fleming fan. He was it was the number 1 receiver. He was over Jackson, coming out of high school. He just get a couple injuries, but he's going to have an amazing career
in the Canadian Football League. It's going to be fantastic.
I think he'll get to the NFL.
No shot.
Yeah. I mean,
one thing I did want to say about Iowa though that I forgot to mention is that those guys are they're bringing out those sweet ass gray alternative uniforms. Did you guys see those things?
So Iowa or Penn State?
No, Iowa.
Iowa. Oh, okay.
They're the whole game. Yeah, they're the all gray, with
Oh no.
They are sweet.
Oh, okay. I don't have any opinion. I have no opinion on Iowa's color rush uniforms. Paige, to you?
I was assuming he was
they're bringing out the all gray. Really brought out
all right. Let's move on. Okay, November 30th. This is it, boys. This is the last of these 5 season-defining matchups. Say the best for last or the worst for last, however you want to look at it. November 30th in the Horseshoe, the defending national champs, the Michigan Wolverines. It makes me sick to my stomach saying that.
How could you even say that?
You're right.
Michigan.
It's it makes me sick just
saying that. Have we vacated that yet?
The Wolverines come to Columbus for the 120th renewal of the game. Michigan leads the all-time series between these schools 61-52 with 6 ties. And the Buckeyes, as we all are painfully aware, are on a 3-game skid in this series. Now, I'm going to repeat a lot of what I said about this game a few weeks back because I think it bears repeating. Stylistically, the Wolverines they're not going to change their stripes. They're going to attempt to win in much the same way that they have the last 3 seasons, but they're going to do it with a completely overhauled coaching staff. As we know, a lot of new faces on this coaching staff. Jim Harbaugh's off to the NFL. He's the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers now, as we know, and Harbaugh took with him their defensive coordinator Jesse Minter, defensive line coach Mike Elston, and their strength and conditioning coach Ben Herbert off to Los Angeles. Sharon Moore, the former offensive coordinator and offensive line coach, was elevated to head coach, as we know. He inked a 5-year deal worth about $6 million a year to replace Harbaugh. Moore's a talented coach, but look, guys, he's going to have his work cut out for him this season with only 5 returning starters, 1 on offense and 4 on defense. Michigan hasn't been very active in the transfer portal. You'd think they would have with those losses. Only 9 incoming transfers. The Wolverines currently sit 54th in the 24/7 Sports transfer rankings. They did actually acquire a few good players out of the portal. Maryland linebacker Jayshawn Barham, Michigan State safety Jaden Mangum, probably the 2 most notable players that they got out of the portal. It's hard to know what Michigan's going to get from their 16th ranked 2024 recruiting class. I mean, how were they not able to capitalize on the last 3 years and do better in recruiting? They're only 16th, according to 24/7 Sports, in the 2024 recruiting rankings. Sharon Moore is going to have to replace all 5 starters on the offensive line. His leading rusher and Blake Corum, their 2 best wide receivers, Roman Wilson and Cornelius Johnson, and of course, quarterback J.J. McCarthy. Tight end Colston Loveland is the only returning starter on the offense, guys. And running back Donovan Edwards, he'll be back. We know he's made a lot of big plays for Michigan. Yeah, he's very good. We know he's made a lot of big plays. He scored 2 touchdowns in the national title game. And of course, Ohio State fans will remember what Edwards did to them late in the 2022 game in Columbus. It's interesting, the quarterback situation. Now, redshirt sophomore Alex Orji is the presumptive starter at quarterback this year. Orji appeared in 6 games for the Wolverines last season. He did not attempt a forward pass. He only has 1 career pass attempt for Michigan, and that was way back in 2022. It was a 5-yard completion against UConn.
I think that Jaden Denago is going to be the starter.
We'll see. I don't know. Orji is the guy everybody seems to be talking about, and he was used strictly as a runner last year. He finished 2023 with 86 yards rushing on 15 carries and 1 rushing touchdown. On defense, we think Michigan's still going to be very good. They returned defensive tackles Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. They might be the best 2 defensive tackles in the whole country. We know they got a great corner in Will Johnson coming back. We think they're going to be pretty good off the edge with Josiah Stewart and Derek Moore. They both played reserve roles last year, but they were both really productive. They combined for, I think, 10.5 sacks and 55 quarterback pressures in 2023. Phil Steele rates the Michigan defensive line 5th nationally. He rates their secondary 8th and their linebackers 18th. Very tough schedule for Michigan this year. They get Texas, USC, Oregon, Ohio State. They're going to open with one of the better group of 5 teams in Fresno State. Phil Steele, Athlon, and Lindy's all have Michigan ranked in their preseason top 10 and projected as a playoff team. Athlon has Michigan number 7, Lindy's has them number 6, and Phil Steele has the Wolverines. Well, he actually has them all the way down at number 12 in his power poll, so he's not quite as big a believer as the other 2 publications. PVH, give me a few thoughts on this game and your Concernometer score.
Oh, they'll have 4 losses for sure coming into this game. They're gonna regress to mediocrity where they belong. They had
back to where they
it'll be at home
where they belong.
Yeah, if Ohio State doesn't win this game, then we all might just hang up the banners for a few years and come back in like 2027. But
You think they're going to be a 4-loss team, really? Wow! But by the time we play,
I'm looking at their schedule. They got Oregon, Washington. They have a hard schedule. Texas. I'm sure they'd like to dump Texas. They're like, why the hell did we, schedule Texas in this new world? Like, we shouldn't we get rid of that, even though it's at home? So yeah, my guess is they lost too many guys. I hate this expression, but they shot their wad last year. Kudos to you. You cheated. You got there. It's fine. We'll take that title back when we, find out how bad you guys are actually cheating, and we'll see you back in the mediocrity lane with Indiana here very shortly.
All right. What's your Concernometer score for this?
A 2. Just a 2.
Wow. A 2. Okay. How about you, CP?
Well, here's the thing. The Shermanator. What was that movie? Like the Shermanator? Like, was that American Pie?
Yes.
Yeah, Shermanator. Yeah, you know what? Hey, I let you. They have picked up some steam on the recruiting front, like the last couple weeks. But you know what? Going into next year, like it's like no idea. I mean, yeah, Donovan Edwards. That's gonna be their like bright spot. But other than that, they lost how many players? Like 18 or 19 to the NFL.
They lost a lot of players.
I mean, there are some there's some boys coming back on the defense, and they lost a lot of the offensive line. So I'm not quite sure how
all 5 starters
be able to run this year. Yes, exactly. So I'm not just quite sure about the Michigan thing. You know what I mean? It's concerning to me because I always say, last year I went back and listened to the pod. My concern meter last year was like 4. So I'm gonna go just the opposite this year, just because, what path we're on. I'm gonna go a 7.
Zach,
okay.
If you're above a 6, I'm gonna eat my hat.
Oh, well, get ready to eat your hat, buddy, because this is a 10 for me. This is out of respect.
Oh my God!
That is out of respect both for the rivalry and what Michigan has accomplished the last 3 seasons. It's also accounting. It's also accounting for the level of pressure that's going to be on Ryan Day to win this game. I mean, all the pressure is on Ohio State. All the pressure is on Ryan Day. However, it is hard to imagine Michigan competing at the same level in 2024 as the last 3 seasons. I mean, Harbaugh's gone. As I mentioned, he took all those good coaches with him. McCarthy and Corum were generational talents for that program that just don't come around all that often. They're gone. All 5 starters on the offensive line are gone. Their projected starter at quarterback has 1 career pass attempt. In all due respect to Mason Graham, Will Johnson, and Colston Loveland, who might be the best players at their positions in the country, are they going to be enough for Michigan to come into the shoe and beat a highly motivated Ohio State team that we think probably has the best roster in college football? I don't know, man. According to FanDuel, Ohio State is currently a 9.5-point favorite in this game. DraftKings has Ohio State at -10. So the odds makers clearly have their doubts about Michigan in this game. But, like I said, man, there's just a lot of pressure on Ryan Day in Ohio State. I mean, Day has the better team. He's at home. He's on a 3-game losing streak in this rivalry. Guys, we saw John Cooper fail repeatedly with the more talented team in this very same situation. Because of that pressure, there is a psychological hurdle I believe that Ryan Day and this team are going to have to clear to win this game. Now, this is another game where I think Chip Kelly could make a huge difference. I mean, you could argue that Kelly was brought here specifically to win this game and to beat Oregon. I mean, otherwise, Chip, we're good. I mean, we just need to show up for this game and for Oregon. I mean, this is where Kelly's really going to earn his paycheck. And I'm talking about designing a more bespoke game plan that's aimed at exploiting Michigan's weaknesses, reaching into his bag of tricks at high leverage moments, overall just calling a much more aggressive game than what we've seen from the Ohio State offense the last 3 seasons in this game. That's how you win this game, as we know. That's how Sharon Moore helped Michigan win it last season. So I think this is a big spot for Chip Kelly as well. I also think this is a game, this is why you go out and get a Caleb Downs in the portal and a Quinshon Judkins. They're the kind of talent that helps you win games like these. So that gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling going into this game, knowing that you've got Chip Kelly there helping Ryan Day out in the high leverage moments this season, and you've got players like Downs and Judkins, added to a very loaded, talented roster. PBH, I'm going to kick this back to you. Any other thoughts on this game?
Yeah, so I think far be it for me to lecture the master, but I think you're failing to one big difference is Ohio State will be in the playoff, win or lose this game.
That's right.
And my guess is Michigan will have to win this game to make the playoff. And so
okay,
I think
that's a good point.
The psychological, and so, right, this is our new world, right? Like, we're so used to this, all the marbles, you win this game, you're in the playoff, you lose this game, you're not. And I think that takes the pressure off of Ryan Day a little bit.
Good point.
As far as having to win this game. And I think Michigan is going to have multiple losses coming into it, and they're not going to have the horses. And I just think, and so again, like at a macro level, and this is our new reality, right? Like, and maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, but I don't think Ohio State's going to have to win this game, and they can still control their own destiny. My guess is Michigan's going to have win this game to make the playoff.
That's a really good point.
And how that plays out psychologically, who knows?
We don't know yet. You're right.
You could go down. I mean, this is our most talented roster in how long? And Michigan is going to be a shell of themselves.
Yeah.
And so, if you can't, if you can't win this one, Ryan, then, we got other things to worry about, but I'm not concerned about that.
Okay. Interesting. Well, you do make a good point. I guess, my take on this game is kind of like the old take that you would have in the 14 playoff world, right? Or the BCS reality.
Sure. No, 100%. Right? And that's fair.
Yeah.
And you're also the person that 4 years ago said this rivalry is dead.
That's true. I did. That was a freezing cold take at this point.
Yeah. I mean, come on, more, you've forgotten more about college football than I'll ever know, but it's just interesting how things have changed and we're going to be in this new world. And
that's true.
Who the hell knows what's going to happen? But if Ohio State doesn't win this one, I'll eat my hat also. I'll eat 2 hats. But you're at 10? Come on.
Yeah. It will be interesting because will Ohio State have locked up its Big Ten title game berth before this game? And, and I guess that could also maybe take a little bit of the motivation out. But no, probably not. No, you're on a three-game losing streak.
Yeah.
This team came back specifically to win this game. I mean, this is on their list of reasons, very high on the list, if not at the very top, of the reasons that all those draft eligible, seniors came back for another go. CP,
that and all the money.
Well, the money too. That didn't hurt. CP, do you want to spend a little time talking about
Right.
2025 recruiting?
You know what? I know, we are kind of way over. I will bring a segment next. We'll probably do another pod another week or two, right? So I will update everybody on the recruiting. I know our boy Paige has to go to dinner, so I didn't want to keep it held up.
All right, good stuff.
Z, we will start out next time with recruiting.
Yes.
All right, we'll talk a little recruiting next time. All right, fellas. Well, listen, that was a great effort.
We have time.
Let's end things there. Thanks so much for making the time for our listeners. We will be back with another pod probably after Big Ten Media Days in a couple of weeks. We'll talk about a little recruiting. Until then, thanks so much for listening, and go Bucks. You've been listening to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast. Follow us on X at South_stands.